First of all, I'm going to build a little bit on what Andrew talked about, talking about digital transformation. It's not easy, but we want to see what it really looks like, what the basis of that's going to be. We're going to look at you mentioned the word digital thread. So I'm going to bring that to life. What is a digital thread? How does that work within an enterprise? So before I kick off, I really want to take the opportunity to say thank you for Technia to give me the opportunity to present today. A very quick introduction. 20 odd years in the business. I used to work for IBM round about the same time that this all started. My very first job was convincing draftsmen to stop using drawing boards and start using this really cool new tool called computer-aided design. And I know what you're thinking, I don't look that old, but it's actually true. I was there. I still remember microfiches with great fond memory. But today I work with manufacturers across the world, helping them understand what digital transformation is beyond all the buzzwords, and you heard a few of them already today. I work with the World Economic Forum as an expert in advanced manufacturing. And as you can see, I've led global transformations in engineering and manufacturing for companies like Dyson and SKF Group. So today, I'm going to try and start to demystify a few of these things around digital transformation. So I always have to start off with Beaker and talking about PLM. Most people know what CAD and PDM is, but very few companies and enterprises that I work with really understand what product lifecycle management's all about. And as Beaker says very clearly, it's like trying to smell the colour 9. It's meaningless to many businesses. So we have to bring that to life. So when we start bringing that to life, we ask companies, well, what is PLM to you? Most businesses actually think it's about the drawings and the CAD models that the engineers create. But actually, for many businesses, that's connected to other things like bill of materials, product records, data, information, rules, design rules. I'm sure a lot of companies will use design rules. But are those design rules only used by engineering, or are they used by sales, perhaps, as well? And things like engineering change, the bane of every company's life. Engineering change, getting that working effectively within your organization. And it's connected to many things. You'll have your PLM system. You'll have many legacy applications spread across the organization. You're probably actually using the world's most popular PLM system. It's developed by Microsoft. It's called Excel. And I'm pretty sure you all use that to some degree today in the processes and the way you work. Now, some companies have got a little bit clever, and they go, well, yeah, okay, that's what we use. Yeah, that is the information. And then what they start to do is to go, well, it's not just engineering. Manufacturing use that as well. And actually, the service folks create that. But what they also do is start moving that data around, and they start creating new silos of information within the organization against different functions. Yes, data is passed. Quite often, when I started at SKF, when we were trying to get information to the shop floor, somebody would literally take a drawing and then manually input stuff into Excel, to be honest. So what we do, and what I do, is I help companies start to think about, well, what does this look like? What does it mean from an organization in an integrated and connected way? So we start thinking about this digital thread. Very first of all, we think about the processes. We start about what we offer to actually our customers, what there was ordered, what was designed, how do we build the thing, the product you make, where and when do we want to build it, what we actually built in production, and then what was actually shipped to the end customer, what was delivered, what was even commissioned, and perhaps even what was maintained. That starts forming the true life cycle of a product. And when you start thinking about that, there isn't a single role for PLM. You'll see across the board, you're phasing in and out of different business enterprise applications. We live in the world of PLM, but there's other things like ERP out there. There's the MES systems you need to use on the shop floor when you execute. There's customer relationship management that capture all the information from the customers. And then there's the e-commerce platforms that many businesses have now adopted, which is actually about selling the product to the end user. So the way that information moves around defining, transacting, executing, validating, tracking, the way that business needs to start to think about that is changing that siloed mentality of the way we think about the product. And what we do is we start companies, and the work we do is we tend to start companies from a very top level. Do they understand their business? Now, every business understands their business, but can they pictorially see the way it works? So let's start with what we know best today, PLM. Yeah, you've got product development, product engineering. They're designing products and solutions that you have in the market. There's a bit of R&D feed into that. Maybe there's a top-level strategic planning. Your roadmaps are coming in as well, combined with your R&D functions. But that information then needs to start flowing to your e-commerce platforms, your configurators, your catalogs, what you sell there. You start receiving your orders in from customers. Then you have your demand management processes. That starts you to help balance and plan ahead of what the inputs you're getting in to whether you can actually manufacture it, the forecasts. You have your procurement. You have to buy things generally to sell things and to make things, which then work with your suppliers, who then supply those bits. Then we move into the actual manufacturing preparation and planning. So you start passing information down, the actual process development work, all the way through to actual materials planning on the line. And then you're actually on the line level planning itself. So you're actually going all the way down through your enterprise in this planning process. You start thinking about the logistics, the warehouses, the stock locations, stock levels. And then starting to actually say, well, how do we get this to the end customer? And how do we support the end customer? And then what does the product information look like through all those processes? So what we started to do, and what we do is we help customers really understand where this stuff is, what the product, the digital thread that was mentioned earlier on. How does that actually start to work and connect things together? Where does, a sales order, why do you go, that's not digital thread? Well, there it is, because you're actually ordering a product. A product has a part number that you order. That part number has to come from somewhere. So this all starts to connect together. You have things like the engineering bomb, which we all know and love. You have the manufacturing bombs. You have service bombs. You maybe have a bit of processes or routings that you have to do off the same data. So we start thinking about how that all evolves, how that information grows as you go through this business process. And then we start looking at the actual applications that need to start. So support this. This is the last piece of the equation. So once we understand the information, we start pulling this all together. So here, we start off with the world of PLM. This is quite straightforward. But when we go into the world of e-commerce, there is a relationship then, a bit of a blurring, another blurred lines around that product configurator and sales configurators, because those rules which you develop in engineering need to be passed through to sales so they can configure the products so you can make them according to how you designed and specified them. You will have your product catalogs you want to pass through. Now, as you whirled into the world of demand management, you start seeing the world of e-commerce and ERP start blurring around. Procurement and suppliers, well, typically that's ERP. That's a nice simple one. But again, when you move into the manufacturing, planning and preparation, you start seeing that, again, that blur between what you can do in PLM and what you can do in ERP. And that's where a lot of tension, particularly around the M-bomb, who owns the M-bomb, who creates it. I see that so often in companies, particularly those going through digital transformation. And then we talk about the plants themselves. You've got a relationship there between ERP and MES. The logistics are typically held and managed by ERP systems. And then as you go through the aftermarket, that's where you get your CRM and your ERP systems kicking together. Now, this isn't a masterclass of what systems do you need to do what. What this is about is there is no one single answer to this problem. It's not black and white. These lines are blurred. And as a business, as you go through your digital transformation strategy, you need to start thinking about how you approach it. So, where do you start? We tend to start with actually putting down the business process on a single page. Why do we do this? I'm sure somebody has created a Visio diagram in their career at some point of a business process. They spent a lot of time doing it and nobody ever used it. You might have used it a bit, but never really reborn. And when you show it to leadership, do leadership really understand what they're looking at? Whereas if you can show a business your process from the idea you start developing products to how you support them in the market on one single page, people get it. They understand it. They recognize the company they work for. And what do? We start then applying different lenses to help companies understand the opportunity that lies behind it. So we look at actually where value is created in that process. That value could be customer-centric value. It could be safety-related steps that you have. We look at how much effort there's actually needed to do these steps. Now, generally, this is a bit of a revelation for companies. By the way, this is not a time and motion study. We don't go around with clipboards. We go around iPads now. But the reality is that we only look at a step and say, look, is it 0 to 2 hours? Is it 2 to 8? Or do you take more than 8 hours? So we get a view of how much effort it's needed to execute the process. We then look at rework. Now, this is going to come a bit, I'm sure, a massive surprise, yeah? Rework tends to happen with high-effort steps, where there's lots of systems, lots of business processes coming around, where mistakes basically get made. But what we're helping to do is visualize where the problems are in that business process that the leadership in most organizations will then get. And then what we finally do is we look at the number of systems you're using, the maturity of the information, and whether that information is actually connected together or not. So, give this an example. This is a customer that we did last year, actually. When we looked at their end-to-end business process, first of all, they had a revelation. We actually showed them that they had 2 critical paths within their organization to do design, develop, manufacture, and support a product. They thought they only had one. That's because they suddenly realized they had an engineering to order product and a manufacturer to stock product that coexisted within their business. So when they had to fulfill an order, they had to design something specifically but pull stuff out of stock and plan for it. And that's why a lot of their planning processes were shot. And that's where some of their design processes were not interacting effectively with the sales process. So almost 3/4 of their process steps required a lot of administration. What do I mean by administration? They're taking information from one system, not integrated, by the way, and manually transposing that into another system. Out of those process steps, 30% of them were using 3 systems or more to execute. That was a business that has grown organically by adding new applications and systems as they needed to, never against a real strategy of what do we do? How do we want the business to work, which we saw earlier on. And 40% actually meant they had to go and do some rework. Just think about it, 40% of those business process steps involve some level of rework. That's pretty inefficient. Now, I'm going to hold my hand up. This isn't a PLM one. This is an ERP. We actually led this UK manufacturing business to a £10 million plus ERP investment. The business case sucked. It was absolutely diabolical. But when the leadership saw the implication, the lack of strategy, the debt, the technical debt they had within the business, they knew for them to survive and hit their business goals, they had to change. And the thing that made the difference was the world on the page, because they could see it, they could feel it, they could recognize the problems they had within the business. The other thing we talk about, and we then lead them onto, is, well, what needs to underpin it? We talk about the product DNA. Now, the product DNA is essentially a model of information. What makes up and what defines the things your companies manufacture? Now, some of these things are going to be straightforward for you. Everybody knows there's going to be parts, yeah? There's going to be bill of materials. And there's going to be geometry, your CAD files, your drawings. There's going to be documentation. Some of that could be around your tests, your test specs, your test results. There's going to be the materials that you produce, and obviously sustainability, which is actually one of the big trends we didn't talk about earlier on. Sustainability is really important. Understand the materials you use. And then finally, the core processes, engineering change being one of them, but not the only one. Now, that information model forms the basis of the analysis, for example, when we do around system maturity. How mature are all these things defined? How connected are they in what we talked about as the digital thread? But more importantly, when you take that DNA, have you considered that in the way that you sell the product? You make the product. You support the product. Most businesses will certainly start with that DNA from an engineering context. So how have they thought about how that information is connected? And that then creates that enterprise information model. So you can talk about a part is connected, many parts are connected together, they create the bill of materials. But that also is the same part that gets utilized in manufacturing to create the manufacturing bill of materials. New manufacturing specific parts would come in, consumables. So you start building that model in the context of how you as a business need to use that information, not necessarily which system it needs to sit in. So that comes back to those very earlier models, like that diagram I showed you where you see things moving left to right. It's how does that information flow? How does it need to connect together? That information underpins it, which then can drive your strategy of how you start to connect your systems. So we talked about integration here, but integration could also be to systems and machines. How you collect information from wider business processes, where we could start doing some of the AI analysis, which we saw in the earlier presentation. To correlate information together to both analyze and predict. So, the real benefit of AI is, as well as drilling down and looking at information, is to start to predict what might happen. And then using tools like simulation and validation, digital commissioning of factories, the digital factories. All of that then forms the basis of giving you the springboard to achieve that. So again, I'm going to bring this to life, and this is a PLM one actually, but we did this for a very large manufacturing business, and we actually really demonstrated that the information was disconnected across the whole organization that drove significant process inefficiencies. This in turn, I love rework loops. Rework just happens. Nobody knows why often. This starts to bring why it was occurring. And we could actually see how that information was disconnected. And then when we reconnected it, increased its maturity, the potential, the benefits in the organization became quite clear. What were those benefits? End-to-end process efficiency. We're not talking about engineering efficiency. There was one gain there. Actually, there was a slight increase in some areas of engineering. But in manufacturing, there was huge benefits. In the sales side of the organization, huge benefits as well. They were able to respond to customers faster. And in the manufacturing processes, there was a lot more flexibility that we enabled because we're able to share that information. The benefits were actually, and this is a different example, but there was almost a 73% reduction in the administration tasks that were needed. They were able to take a customer requirement and actually deliver a solution through application engineering almost in half or just over half the time. And there was a significant reduction of time needed to find the information that they needed. So these strategies of connecting it, understanding the flow, understanding that digital thread, building that information model, assessing the business in a way that everybody can get, can have significant benefits to the organizations we work with. So there's 3 things I'd like you to take away from today, other than my age. Are we doing okay for time? Yep. Number 1, align around a simple model of how your business works. If you're going to create a digital transformation, there are so many buzzwords, so many exciting things out there. But develop something like a world on a page that everybody from the shop floor all the way to your boardroom gets and understands when they see it. It doesn't have to be complex pages and pages of Visio. Behind. Second one, use that model to understand where your challenges, or if I put this in a positive way, the opportunities might be. But more importantly, use that to validate and demonstrate the impact that is having on your business performance. Because when people see that, when the management see that, that's when they get excited. And then finally, build an enterprise information model. How you want all of your information connected together. And use that as the foundation for change. But do that, please, in a way that is agnostic. Don't build it around your business systems. Build it around your business processes and how it supports your customers, how it supports engineering, how it supports manufacturing, and how it supports your service environment. And then hopefully, if I hit almost the nail on the head on timing, I have one last thought for you. Now, we talked about AI. I do like ChatGPT and DALL-E. It creates great images. And I am, fortunately, mixing my metaphors and analogies here. But number 1, this is really easy in a sort of 15, 20-minute presentation of how to go and approach digital transformation inside of your business. But let's remember that Rome was not built in a day. And secondly, these topics are very big. So as you break them down, try not to eat the elephant whole. I think you've got both of them in there now. Yeah? Try not to eat the elephant whole, but to actually start using some of these frameworks, like the world on the page and the information model, to prioritize the things that can be easily implemented in the shortest amount of time and investments. And that starts forming the roadmap of your digital transformation. So thank you very much for your time and listening today.